So, so we've been going through Daniel, everybody. We're going through Daniel. And Daniel, we can see that there is there's a lot going on inside this book. And you see there's a lot of stuff that goes against traditional wisdom and kind of has to do with a lot of what we can talk about on Sunday with Matthew is this kind of kingdom way of doing things. So like traditional wisdom is kind of like just fight these corrupt powers and all that stuff of Nebuchadnezzar and all that. But Daniel doesn't really do that. Instead, he continues to be in the flow of the kingdom way, but also and stands his ground on stuff, but is still a great asset to Nebuchadnezzar. And so this goes against just a lot of wisdom. So we see that he doesn't eat the food that is put in front of him in chapter 1. That he continues to eat his own diet. It says vegetables. The meat that was probably getting put in front of him was things like bacon, what you guys have for breakfast, and sausage, and like all that stuff. And that's not the point. It's not about the bacon. And so then in chapter 2, we see I'm blanking. Chapter 2 was the dream, and we see how feckless. That was the word I was trying to come up with last week that I couldn't. Feckless Nebuchadnezzar is. It's like, what do you mean you guys can't read my dreams? And they're like, well, we need you to tell us what it is. I don't think they actually say that, but it's implied. And he's like, no, you can't read it. Off with your head. Guy seems very screwed down emotionally, like this Nebuchadnezzar guy. And so he's like, I'm done with all of you. And he goes to tells his guards to kill everybody. And Daniel's like, no, wait, don't kill everybody. And we see this again is that Daniel continues to be a service to this corrupt king, this feckless king. This king that we're going to find out in the next couple of chapters is treating people in a subhuman way. And so he is being subhuman. It's an interesting commentary that we're coming up on with Nebuchadnezzar, is that when you treat people subhuman, you're being subhuman. And so that's some of what Jesus says, the summation of all the law and the prophets is love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, right? So that we're going to that. So today we're looking at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. And there are all kinds of interesting things here. So Pam and everyone watching online, we're going to do NIV translation reading because the other one is down.
You can do a New King James.
Do what?
You can do New King James.
Well, it's not the New King James. This is the dramatized version. And so I have NIV ready to go. I think it's and I will try to scroll and keep up with the scroll, but I may lose it. So we will see. We will see. So here we go.
Before you start,
yeah,
I want to paint a picture here. This statue is 60 cubits high and 6 wide. Just kind of translate that to the wrong numbers, but 10 feet high and 1 foot wide. That's your aspect. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, also, you saying the measurements again.
60.
60. So
cubits high, 6 cubits wide.
Think about what does 6 mean?
Incomplete.
Yeah, it's this incomplete idea. As soon as you said that, I can't believe we missed that last week. That's 6. 7 has a sense of completeness, like 7 days of creation. 6 is this idea of incomplete, like that. Some people think it's the devil's number because it's like 666. It's just incomplete type of idea.
And does it say that?
Huh.
That it's 60 cubits high.
Yeah, he made a statue.
But it's interesting, in the last chapter, his dream was about a statue that all crumbles and falls apart, and this one, he's building a statue.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So that is,
Kidding.
Maybe one
save
of
that,
these.
save that comment. So, all right, let's get to reading here. And Daniel chapter 3. So let me share the screen. Share sound.
This is in the NIV or?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it can be in whatever translation you like it to be. You just have to know that we're doing it.
I have all.
You have all of them? Easy there. No one likes a bragger. like that. Yeah.
I don't believe that.
Yeah. Oh man.
That's Charlie Brown's translation.
Daniel 3.
Here we go.
King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "Nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace."
Scroll for you.
Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the nations and peoples of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "May the king live forever. Your Majesty has issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold, and that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your Majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up." Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your Majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your Majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent, and the furnace so hot, that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisers, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" They replied, "Certainly, your majesty." He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisers crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Daniel 4. King Nebuchadnezzar,
Easy
to
there.
the nations and peoples of every language who live in all the earth, may you prosper greatly.
Okay.
The Jewish Bible actually has 30, that
31.
introduction to 4 is part of chapter 2.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
How much of it?
31 through 33.
Let me get Pam involved in what we're talking about. There we go. Like that's because everyone that watches this later will, but that's what they see too. Okay, so you're saying 4 kind of through.
It would
No.
be,
Verse
yeah,
30,
let's see.
31 on is in verse, is in chapter
Throughout all generations.
Until, yeah,
Okay.
verse 1 through 3.
So Nebuchadnezzar the king. So this is chapter 4, verse 1. We'll kind of I'll read it. Nebuchadnezzar the king, to all the peoples, nations, languages that dwell on the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I thought it good to declare the signs and wonders of the Most High God has worked for me. How great are his signs and how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. His dominion is from generation to generation. All right. So we'll see. We can see next week of like, well, where should that have been? Where should that chapter break like be? Because remember, the chapter breaks are they're a lot newer than the actual scripture itself. I mean, the original Hebrew language, and Aramaic for that matter, that's all in here, didn't have vowels in it. Like it was just consonants. And so when you see Hebrew and you see like there like be a small T or dots underneath words, all those things, those are vowel markers. Those the scribes worried that the language was going to be lost and no one know. And in some ways it has. So they added the pointings later to the language for the vowels because they're worried the language is going to get lost. And we have actually lost one word. And that's why there's confusion around it. Yahweh. Yahweh is what we think God's name is, but they never pointed it. They never pointed as added the vowels to it. And so that's what, and the practice was because they never wanted to say God's name, even though it was written down in the text. They never want to say it. So what they did is they would say the word for Father, Adonai, whenever they came to that word Yahweh. And so where the word Jehovah came from is they added the consonants for what we think is Yahweh now, but the vowels for Adonai. So that's where Yehovah came from. And so that's that's where, so Jehovah is the word for Yahweh that we have, but vowels of Adonai in it. And so that's where Jehovah came from. And that's why you don't hear it much anymore, because we don't really think that's correct. And so,
Except when they come to your door.
except for when the J-dubs come to the door to say hello. So there at the end, Nebuchadnezzar gets so close. It's like, you guys must, like, don't say anything bad about my boy's God here, or off with your heads, right? Like that's, and it's like, wait a second, like he still doesn't get it, right? He still
to the top.
yeah. So we'll get to that. It just made me laugh when we were going through it there. All right. So what stood out to you? What stood out to you?
Well, the Jewish Bible says like the repetition of all like the people that were there and the musical instruments may have been added for comic effect, especially in a biblical tradition.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So comic effect, and so we're talking about the repetition.
Like the satraps,
Okay. Like he kept saying all these people.
musical instruments. They kept saying the
That
whole
was
list.
a term paper. They were adding their word count.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so that's actually a really interesting observation, because I'm on this. I've been on a kick for years, but this is literature, and there's all these literary forms that are happening inside of this, and it kind of shows us things like that. So you could imagine, like if you say it with comedy, that if someone is reading this out, you can almost picture like someone on stage. And then, because I feel like I've seen stage performances that do things like this, like that's where it's like, and the satraps and these people all ran away and hid and all that stuff. I think Monty Python.
I was just going to say Monty Python.
And Holy Grail really makes fun of that a lot. Like that's like yeah. So like but they keep saying all the pomp and circumstance, and so I was about to say something, but it's not good to say it on camera.
Maybe more,
Save it for after.
more making them the Babylonian administration and Nebuchadnezzar look ridiculous. Not
Yeah.
comic, but ridiculous.
Yeah.
All of those troubles.
all these things. That's a good way of looking at it. You have the So we saw in chapter 2 that there's this dream of this giant statue, and gets taken down by a tiny little pebble or a rock, a stone, and then so it's taken down there, which is interesting imagery with thinking about David and Goliath and all that stuff, but now. The first chapter after it, talking about comedic effect, and this is what Ed was pointing out, he just goes ahead and builds it. He's like, boy, that dream had a great idea. That's, and it's like, well, at least if it's up, if there's going to be a stone from the heavens that comes and destroys it, at least it'll be up for a little bit, right? Like that. That's and we can do that. So. I do think you can see some of the humor in that, and then yet the authors have it 6 cubits, 60 cubits. So you have this idea of this incomplete vision going on, not quite there. Remember, I was talking to I actually went and visited Tom Petrowitz yesterday, and I was talking to him, and he was asking me about numbers in the Bible, and just reiterating everyone here. The way I view numbers, which is the correct way, and is that they're like emojis. Like when you're writing a text message to someone and you send them a heart or a thumbs up or 100 or something like that. You're not saying this concrete thing. It's kind of more guessing at emotions about what you're sending. You know, you're not like that's, and I think the numbers in the Bible are much closer to that. Like they're pointing us in a direction. And so that incomplete number there, you know, of the 6 is kind of pointing us in like, oh, okay. Like, it's like, okay, I get it. I get it.
Yeah, you notice Nebuchadnezzar never got to the point where he would accept God as his God.
Mm.
Yes, you guys got it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He's thinking he's probably better than their God.
Yeah. Yeah.
The king.
He's a king. He's a God amongst men.
What did you say the number 7 is?
Complete. Like creation. 7 days of creation.
They made a point of saying that the furnace was 7 times hotter than it normally was.
Yeah, 7. Yeah. Furnace was 7 times hotter than it normally was.
As it can get.
Yeah.
But also, 6, in addition to being incomplete, is also imperfect, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
That's kind of what I mean by incomplete. I mean,
Okay.
Imperfect, incomplete.
but then the statue is imperfect, and that we're worshiping something imperfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
To me, incomplete is a different meaning,
Okay.
but it's the same thing. I agree.
Yeah.
I still do not grasp the significance of the furnace being 7 times hotter than normal.
So I think we're getting into like what good numbers are and what bad numbers are. So like all of a sudden you see that God is working and you have this very complete fire. Like no one, I think something like this is said when we say the Apostles' Creed, that we say that he descended into hell. The way I view that is that that's saying like he was dead. He's all the way dead. He's in Sheol, anywhere where you want to go. Like it's not like he was just in a coma and like he came out of the coma and everyone's like, he is risen. Like that's I think the Apostles' Creed is trying to get us like all the way. You know?
And I think that's what the 7 is saying too. Is
Yeah, I think
the
that's
7
what 7
is as hot as it can get.
It's all the way.
All the way.
Yeah. I think it's all the way. Yeah.
I always had learned that when he descended into hell,
Yeah.
he went to hell and claimed victory over them.
Yeah. That is the I grew up with that too. Like that. And so because Peter in 1 Peter, I don't know, one of Peter's epistles, he talks about how he went down and preached to the souls in hell. And I think Peter's saying kind of the same thing that the Creed is saying, that it's all the way. It's all the way. And so that's especially when you look at it in the context of what Peter's trying to say there. Like it's like he went all the way down, kind of thing. And especially like, so like our concept of trying to decide if I want to stir the pot.
Stir it.
Like, I don't need you.
Stir.
I don't need yeah. I don't need that in my life.
This is being recorded.
Yeah.
Everybody on camera.
Yeah.
Stir.
So
I actually tell people to watch this
never again. So
every other week.
yeah. So
You know, it's what they do in jail and in prisons.
the concept of hell over the years has evolved. Okay, like, and so
Something worse?
yeah. So the concept, and here's what I mean by concept, is like what we think of hell and what it is today is different than what they believed like in the past. I mean, think about it. Like you have Dante's Inferno. We're very Dante's Inferno-ish in our understanding of hell. We're not really this understanding, Dante's Inferno understanding. All right. So, the Old Testament concept of hell is Sheol, and Sheol is the grave. That's what it is. They didn't have a concept where you went down and like there's like Satan with a pitch.
So you're just in the grave and you're nothing.
Like yeah, you die. Like that. That's and so, and if I'm honest with everyone here, that reading of Sheol really colors my understanding of how the early church is translating hell. And so that is, and that also is kind of what I think Peter's trying to get at, because you got to think about what hell was. The Jewish understanding was the grave, and hell was this thing the Greeks came up with. You know, like so, like that's, and so they and what cultures do, they grab stuff like, oh, this is kind of saying what I think it's saying, and so like over there, all this stuff. I'm not saying that this is how it is or this is how it isn't. This in the literature of the days, I think these are helpful readings because we really don't know what's going to happen, right? There's precious little talked about. What we do know when we die, or when someone in our family dies, is that we will be with Jesus and it will be far better. We know that. And that's where our hope is, you know? Like, and so that's where our hope is. So I think every one of us, when we die and we see everything, I think the second coming will be like this. We'll all go, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's that's okay. Man, why was I reading it like that? Like that's like all these. Yeah. I think that's the way it is, and that's why there's so little written about what happens after we die. There's so little, and we're grasping at straws, trying to create this entire theology around it, and so. I kind of like, I don't really participate in it. But Peter was very informed from Jewish thought. And that's kind of why I kind of go to this idea of Sheol. And that's why I think the resurrection is such a big deal. Because what it's saying is that you don't succumb to the world. You are resurrected. And that same life force that blows into Adam's lungs and animates Adam, you know, in Genesis chapter 2, is the same thing that raises you up again. And I think that's a way more compelling story, you know, and like that. But it is my opinion. It is my opinion. It's correct, but it's my opinion. Like all those things. So that's, and you got to understand that, like over there. So the all those things. I can't remember what got us onto that.
I have no idea what we got here.
And but
I think I asked what 7 meant.
Yeah. Like, and so that I think it was talking about that there was like a similar idea going. Anyway, but that's it's and don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not like denying hell's existence and stuff like that. I'm not smart enough to do anything like that. I do think that we will like, you know, and like, okay. And so like, but what it does say over and over again is that you will be with Jesus. And that's far better. And so that is what I believe. And if you've ever been to any of my funerals, say that over and over and over again. So
an interesting thing. I don't know whether Tracy's online version has it, but in the Jewish Bible, when you get to the end of verse 30, there is a break in the printing of equal size as there is between each of the chapters. And
interesting. They just didn't break the chapter there.
Right.
They just didn't put a 4 there.
So they break it. Yeah, it wasn't a full stop. It was all what you sinners do at stop signs. Like that's,
It's also interesting, though.
Say that it was kind of like, thought to be the first doxology ever.
okay,
Pagan god, a pagan king.
a pagan king. Okay, that's really interesting. Vance, you were about to say something.
Well, I just think it's interesting that it's the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates. They keep going after Daniel. I mean, they did it in chapter 1, they did it in chapter 2, they did it in chapter 3. We're going to see it again in chapter 4 and in chapter 6. I mean, they just keep going after him. And it reminds me a little, Daniel reminds me a little bit of Joseph in the Pharaoh's court, where he came into the court and was able to solve a riddle, the dream.
Yeah.
It was elevated, but then people knew that he wasn't, eventually they knew that he came from somewhere else and that his family comes and he, but my point is, I think there's some similarities in how we get there. I just find it interesting that they keep attacking him. And it's like they don't like to see their power diminished because the king favors this guy.
Yeah.
And in the Jewish Bible, the astrologers, they call them Chaldeans.
Okay, the
Which are the
Chaldeans.
ones that couldn't interpret the dream.
Yeah.
Right along with that.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's like, and I think this cyclical nature of what's happening here, the same thing, like Nebuchadnezzar keeps going, Daniel, your God is amazing. And then like we get 5 verses later and it's like, but I really need you to worship me. And you have this like it keeps going back to that as we're going through, and it's almost absurd. And there's a lot of absurdity in this story, and I think that's probably why it resonates with people so much. Like, because think about, this is one of the stories we tell our kids. This is one of the stories that we tell, and that is just, if you talk to anyone, they probably know the story about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Like that's, it's just, and I'm wondering if it's like some of this comedy aspects to it is why. It's bigger than life. This like the people that are throwing Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fire are burning up. Like that.
And there wasn't a smell of fire on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they came out, but it sure smelled like burning garlic.
Yeah. Well, and that's and think about how pervasive. Like, so one of my favorite ideas is in John, when charcoal fire is only used twice, around Peter's denial and around the fire of Jesus confronting Peter and restoring him, and that smell of a campfire, that smell of fire, is so pervasive and goes in there. I mean, when the Alzheimer's daycare tried to burn this building down, back 3 years ago, like that. For those of you who don't know,
That was St. Andrews.
Yeah, that was the other Lutheran down another Lutheran church that has an Alzheimer's daycare donated to us a player piano, and the player piano caught on fire. I'm not saying that there's any. All I'm saying is that the first and last number of the serial number of that was 6. Come on. Like that. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Like that's.
Andrews also had a fire.
Yeah. I was saying, yeah. And so we had a fire here, but it took forever for us to get rid of the smoke smell in here. And what finally did was an ozone machine, which we have an ozone machine here at church now. I've been using it inside my mother-in-law's place, and so like that's so it's a miracle worker. But yeah, they didn't smell like the fire.
Jim and I were here from 7 in the morning until 10 at night, 2 days in a row, trying to get that odor out, and not successfully.
Yeah, it was finally that ozone machine. That's what did it. And it will destroy any odor.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Tracy, you said that they substituted Chaldean, they used the word Chaldean in lieu of what?
Of astrologers, which they were known for being astrologers.
In this version, they're using both,
Okay.
Chaldean and astrologer.
Okay. The Chaldeans. Yeah.
And interesting, in verse 11 in the Jewish Bible, and whoever does not fall down and worship shall be thrown into a burning fiery furnace. It says it's probably a post-biblical literature reference to Abraham, based on the passage and the notice that he came from Ur of the Chaldeans, Ur in Hebrew meaning fire.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That note might be smarter than me.
It's smarter than me. I'm
like okay, all right.
That may be too deep.
Like that. That's interesting though.
I like this Bible.
Yeah, I like it.
Well, they have notes that we never think about.
Yeah.
I keep forgetting to read it for this one. So there's a couple things I want to point out because remember we're doing Daniel getting us set to do Revelation later. So I mean, if you guys think that stuff was hot, just wait till we get into that book and we really start messing with it. What is the big sound in Revelation? Or that people think is in Revelation? Like the big sound, like when Jesus comes, like all that stuff. Like I kept thinking about that here. Like what is the big sound that's telling you to worship? Like it's all these.
All of them, yeah. You had to use all of them.
Yeah, it's like all these instruments. Like it's like this big ruckus noise here. It's just that's. I think there's. I don't know what to make of that right now, but like my mind, it's all of a sudden all these sounds. But also there's other times when these things were done this way. It also makes me think of like Jericho, and other places like that. It's interesting that that Nebuchadnezzar is being like, "Hey, we're going to blow all these out," and then everyone just has to stop and start worshiping, right?
What happens when little Johnny decides he's got to practice his lyre?
Yeah.
Johnny's causing a commotion.
A lot of confusion in the rural communities of Babylon. A lot of confusion, but
He's okay if he stays in the garage.
yeah.
With the door down.
Yeah. So that's, but you have all this sound that starts playing, and then everyone is kind of told to worship. I just thought that was an interesting. I don't know what to do with it, but there's definitely some similarities. Now it could just
be like a call to worship. We have in our liturgies, some liturgies,
maybe.
Call to worship.
Yeah, that could be. Like maybe we just need to hit a bunch of notes. Like that's
You could do that to Sunday and see how it works.
yeah.
I'll get on.
I've heard that happen.
We kind of do. It's that little intro video. Like that's. Yeah, well, that also made me think. Well, and that I was thinking about the Muslims, like when they.
Minaret.
Yeah, they start playing all the sounds like that when it's time for prayers. And I kind of wonder if what we're dealing with is a cultural understanding that we don't have. That this group of people in the Middle East has, and it's like when you worship God, there's always this tone that's played. And is that like Nebuchadnezzar this is further evidence that he is lifting himself up as a god? Like in that's so we're hitting like a cultural understanding of this is how God works in the world, and here Nebuchadnezzar is like when you hear this, like you worship me.
How big an area is this? Is this a city or is this the whole country? And how big is how's the big?
Babylon. I don't know how to answer your question besides that word. Like I think.
You should ask you, a town, is it a city, is it a county, is it a state?
Yeah, I don't know.
Play this music. How far out does it go?
Yeah. Well, that was That was my joke about it. It's confusing in the rural areas, like when Johnny's playing his lyre or something like that. Like there's less. There's like that's.
He's got to explain his joke.
There's city Babylon, and then there's a country Babylon.
Yeah, I mean it's the Babylonian Empire, and so I don't know how to answer that question besides just Babylon, and so
And you are babbling on.
yeah.
So here's an interesting thought. I mean, our small group, our together group is doing the book of Ephesians.
Yeah.
And we just finished Ephesians 5 yesterday. And it's interesting because it says, speak to one another in psalms, hymns, spiritual songs, sing and make music in your heart. And it's the same issue about how we treat each other is to use music as a way to call and speak to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we're using it in the Old Testament as a way to call people to prayer and to worship. And it's kind of interesting.
There's a similar idea going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not too dissimilar.
That I just finished teaching. It's just
No, that's a good connection. I think we're dealing with a cultural difference that we really just don't have, and so I will say whenever I play that intro video at the beginning, especially second service, first service not so much. The second service, it's so loud before that video gets, and everyone just and everyone's quiet by the end of it. And that's I don't know, that's fascinating.
What are you saying about first service? We're not quiet?
No. What's that what I'm saying?
He's saying you're not friendly with each other.
That's not true either. I think it's just a smaller crowd, and so they don't have to be as loud. They don't have to be as loud. And so that's I think that's what I'm saying.
We'll see if we can be louder next.
I would appreciate it.
We'll not get up and talk about it.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
It won't be there this Sunday.
Oh, there goes the loudness.
Don't worry, I'll pick up the slack.
So then, so these people kind of getting to the story, because we're kind of running out of time here, but you have people that tell on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and you're kind of sniveling, it's like, oh, like look at these people over here, all that stuff, like that's, and the snitches.
You're doing it to find favor.
Yeah.
With the feckless king.
And with the feckless king. And so the feckless kings do what feckless kings do, right? He's like, what do you mean they're not bowing down to my thing? Like, how dare they? And he gets in the King James it says in rage and fury. Like how do the other translations render that?
He says furious with rage.
Furious with rage. Okay, I didn't know. Sometimes the King James goes crazy on translations.
Mine says in amazement.
Yeah.
In amazement. Read around that.
He leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors.
Interesting. Real in amazement.
Amazement doesn't seem as strong as in rage.
Well, it's so.
Yeah.
It says filled with rage.
Yeah. Raging fury.
Raging fury.
It has a different tone than amazement.
I'm sorry. It also says in here, furious with rage. I read the wrong verse. I'm sorry. Furious with rage.
But yours says amazement.
That's after he sees that there was 4 men. Sorry.
Okay.
You read the same one I had.
Okay, so it does say rage. All right. I was about to
Sorry.
start looking that up in Hebrew.
Sorry, I was on the wrong one.
I'm sitting there trying to think of like how the language works where they translate it like that. Because it could be like awesome or something like that. Just so big to comprehend. And so he has rage and he throws him in there. And that's where we see like it's the fire is 7 hotter than normal. Like what verse is that? I didn't underline that. 19. And so Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the expression on his face changed towards Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So face. Let's talk about face for a second. When you hear face in the Bible, it's you really want to use it more like I'm facing you. Right? Like that's how the Hebrew uses it more. And so his disposition towards them, how he was pointed towards them changed. Like that's also face, like it's the same kind of idea. But when you, especially in Hebrew, when you're thinking about face in there, like it's like, think about like the classic benediction, like make
his face shine upon you.
Make his face shine upon you. Like that's like going towards, like all that stuff. So these are those ideas that are going through there. So like once he's going towards them, and it makes sense. Like they have been in a profitable disposition of Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel and his boys, you know, and now he's upset, and he calls all of his men together, all that stuff, and that all is affected by there. So
you should also remember though that Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were foreigners. They were brought back and then elevated by the king.
Yes.
So all of his court looks at these people coming into the court as outsiders.
Yeah.
And he looks at them as outsiders. He's accepted them in, but they're still outsiders.
And every time they fail to adhere to the rules, it reflects poorly on Nebuchadnezzar's choice.
Right.
Taste.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why he goes completely bonkers every time.
Mhm.
It's an affront.
When I go over it in my head, which is, I'm empty at the point. But anyway, what about Daniel? Did he fall down and worship?
I don't know.
Why didn't he get thrown into the fire?
I don't have an answer at all for that. Yeah.
No, it's just something to think about.
Yeah.
Is he away on vacation?
We had to save him for the lion's den.
Yeah. He's hiding, eating his carrots. And so you want to say something?
No, what is it? Asparagus? What?
Well, remember that in chapter 1 he eats vegetables.
Oh, okay.
And like that's so one thing we also have to remember that if we were a Jewish Hebrew people reading this, one thing that would stand out to us is that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, those are their slave names.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's, and we cannot forget that. And this story it still uses Daniel's name, which is his Hebrew name. But it doesn't, it's for these three guys, it's saying they're Babylonian names, which I don't know quite what to make of that, but I do, it's an important detail. And I think it's saying something about how they are living in Babylon. I think it's saying something important about that where I think we're supposed to see that that's what their names are.
They look incorporated into the culture because their names are their culture, but yet they still worship
Yeah.
the one true God.
Yeah.
They don't bend that.
The good news is they got promoted again. So.
All right. So they get thrown into the fiery furnace, and there's 4 in the furnace. So like the Christian viewing is that that's Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's, and that's a very complimentary view and all those things. What, for those of you who have the Hebrew one, what are they saying? Angel. Which that would make sense. But I do think you're seeing a sense of, in this foreign land, that God has not left them alone, even when they have their Babylonians, which is interesting, like I don't know if that's valid or not, but I think that they're not alone in that.
Well, there's an issue that is sort of subliminal in there, but it's that these people are being seen as Babylonians. They're outsiders. They're Gentiles in a sense by that name. They're not, and God is still working through them as well.
Yeah, which that may answer our name question.
Hmm.
That God. Well, God always works through messengers. That's what angel means. It's messenger in Hebrew. Angel in Hebrew is Malach. And Malach literally means messenger. So you have Malachi. Malachi is basically like angels in English. And so, but that's not how we kind of understand that. He's bringing a message. And so the, but the fact that one of these Malachs is there with them in, this fourth being is there with them, that is how God works in the Old Testament. It's the only time where it's really kind of odd, and it's still kind of attributed to an angel, is with Jacob wrestling God. That's the time when it's like the closest.
In the Lutheran Bible,
Yeah.
it reference to the fourth person. They don't say he's an angel. It says here, walking in the midst of the fire and are not hurt. And the appearance of the fourth is like a son of the gods.
Yeah. 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 And so you're seeing, so the son of the God, like these are like godly things going on. And I think that's why it's not just, I think the reason why they're saying that is this story is big, but I think they're also trying to point out that, hey, God is with these people. Like, it's not just that, Hezekiah jumped in there with them real fast.
So a thought came to me. So they didn't get burned up in the furnace.
Yeah.
They still didn't worship his statue. Why didn't he said, chop their heads off? So, I mean.
Finish the job.
Right.
Like that's.
Is he afraid of the real God? Or is he like, I can be more powerful. I can try and be more powerful than him.
That's a joke.
What was it?
He's amazed.
He's a.
Yeah. So I mean, because he could have still killed them, and he did. So is it? I don't know.
I think.
Couldn't kill him. I think it's out of fear, though. I think it's more. I'm saved by this guy. Maybe an axe is going to do it.
Afraid of what's going to happen. Yeah.
Back up on this.
Well, and so we're talking about fear and stuff like. I think that's a valid emotion for him here. I think that kind of awe and amazement, and also the idea in the Hebrew Bible of like fear of God is always this kind of sense behind it of this kind of like fear of something so big and large like that. That's
like reverence.
Yeah, kind of reverence. Like it's the word for heavy is also used a lot for it. In Hebrew, it's called kavod, and it gets translated as important a lot in English, kavod. But what it literally means is heavy. And so, and I think you have that same kind of idea wrapped in around fear and this heaviness, this weightiness, this importantness type of, like that. And like, and I think fear is part of all that. And like, that's why we get reverence with it and all these things. And you see, like in this over the top story, you have this over the top fourth person who is like the readers, when we look at it, we're like, that's God, like, it doesn't matter if it's an angel, it doesn't matter if it's this or that. I mean, that's why as Christians, we go to, that's Jesus, like that's like over there. Cause like you're trying to go for like the biggest thing possible. And I don't know, as I'm sitting here, I think in the midst of all the fear and all that stuff, it's God is with them and all of that.
But isn't it obvious from the text that he had some sort of a different appearance?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I don't know what a son of God looks like.
Yeah.
Somebody said that.
Well, I think VeggieTales does it well. And there's 4 of them in there, and one's real shiny. That's how VeggieTales handle it.
This looks like a divine being.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the whole angel thing. But like, God uses angels for his presence in the Old Testament. Like that, you cannot divorce that. You cannot divorce that.
Again, Nebuchadnezzar almost gets it, but the Son of God, that's just too close to.
Mm-hmm.
The Son of God.
You're right. It is. He's
That's a translation.
that's his description, which is
So
suggesting that.
It's pretty striking, Rick, how the degree to which Nebuchadnezzar doesn't get it. Right? He sees all these unbelievable things happening, and he still doesn't get it.
So let me read Mark chapter 1, verse 1. You guys don't have to go there. But it says, in the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, as written in the prophets. That is saying something very true about Jesus, but it's also, and this is what I'm pointing out, a slap in the face of Caesar. Because Son of God is what that was a Caesar title for himself. And so like that's why it's doing dual duty there. And I kind of think this expression here is also doing some dual duty. It's like, this one is like there's now 4 in there, and one of them is real important. And one of them is like, one of them looks like the Son of God's, like that's.
The guards got burned up, so it wasn't
It wasn't a human being.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm still smoking.
Do you know what, besides Nebuchadnezzar holding himself up as a god, what other gods are being worshipped at this time? Since he uses,
You would have had the Babylonian gods,
okay.
like Marduk and Tiamat, and all of those.
This footnote in the study Bible says Nebuchadnezzar was speaking as a pagan polytheist and was content to conceive of the fourth figure as a lesser heavenly being sent by the all-powerful God.
If it matters or not, but it's not, God is not capitalized in that description either. When he's talking about it, he says, looks like a son of the gods.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's why I kept going back to like, this one looks really important.
Right.
Like that's like over that, like all like that, or as VeggieTales says, there's one that's real shiny. Like that. That's VeggieTales. Oh man,
Important doesn't it?
90s Christianity.
All the characters of that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll introduce you to VeggieTales. Like that.
That sounds silly when you say it that way.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's Christian culture stuff from the 90s. It's we'll fill you in.
It's his life.
Yeah. Yes. And so then they get out, and we kind of discussed this already, but like Nebuchadnezzar was like, oh my goodness, and like in the fear and all that stuff. And then we need to get to the end of it where he does this same thing that he's done every chapter so far. Where he's like, oh my goodness, we were all wrong. Anybody that says anything against their gods, because remember, he's polytheistic, which means tons of gods. So he's like, oh man, I didn't realize we can add this one to the arsenal, which is what Paul is talking about on Mars Hill when he stands up. He's like, to this unknown God, here, I know who it is. And he's like, if any of you say anything bad about any of that, off with their heads. And you realize, like, and it's almost disappointing. He doesn't say off with their heads, but he's like,
No, he cuts into pieces and turns over their house.
The head is one of the pieces, right? One of the pieces. And so it's all this stuff, like, and it's almost disappointing, like, oh, you're so close, but yet you're still putting 100% of what you think of how God's act onto this one. And this, I think, is setting us up for, I think it's chapter 7 when Nebuchadnezzar, I don't know if it's right, but Nebuchadnezzar then becomes like a beast in the field. Is that we still see, even though he's realizing
Mix us up.
God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is over there. He's still treating everyone like they're subhuman, and which makes him subhuman. And I think that's what's so important about Jesus' teaching is that he's putting us back into that kingdom way, which is in that creation way of God, and that's why the law and the prophets is like love your neighbor as yourself. You're living out your creation by loving and treating people with dignity and respect, and upholding.
So this book is oddly enough a big book of hope.
Yeah.
It's talking about a better situation than what they're in, and that there's hope for something better, that God is with the right people. But he's with the right people.
Yeah. I think that's true. And that's what Revelation is too. It's a book of hope.
It takes a little harder to.
And the reason why I say that is that there's a strong movement that wants to strip hope from Revelation, and they want to make it scary. And
yeah,
it's the scary stuff in Revelation is a realization that God meets you in the midst of the scariest stuff that you have. And so that's what's going on there. That's what's going on there. So it's, hello, man. Like, we're basically done, but that's you're doing all right. You're doing all right. Like that. That's, yeah, you're fine. So but let's end there right there. So for everyone that's watching online, thank you for joining us today and all of that. So, all right.